Let me ask you something. The next time someone asks you how you're doing, how will you answer that? I mean, maybe you've already been asked that very question this morning. If you and I are honest, there's a good chance that the answer to that question is somewhere in the neighborhood of busy or tired, or maybe just a long exhale that says more than any word ever could. And I know because I've been there. I've given that answer. And I've heard it so many times that I actually start to wonder if exhaustion has simply become so normal that we don't even question it. Now, I need you to know, I love this time of year. Spring is my favorite, and there's something about the way that spring gives way to summer. Longer evenings, the smell of cut grass, lilacs are in bloom, the sense that something lighter is just around the corner. And yet, if I'm being honest with you and with myself, I also notice that some of us seem to be crash landing into summer. I mean, low-grade exhaustion has become so familiar that we've actually stopped noticing it. It feels like the new normal. Author and computer science professor Cal Newport, he describes how on the other side of the pandemic, he says that we are in the era of the great exhaustion, which, I mean, makes sense. We live in a culture where busyness is seen as a badge of honor, where we're often multitasking. I mean, think of like keeping multiple tabs open on your computer all at once, or maybe that's just me. And we live in a culture of urgency where we are constantly accessible to people all the time. And the reality is that this is impacting our physical and mental well-being. And I don't think that this is what God had in mind for us. And so today we are diving into a 5-week series called Rest and Recreation. And over these weeks, we're going to invite one another to slow down, to catch our breath, to look at the invitation of Jesus toward a life of love and consider, does Jesus intend for us to be this busy and this exhausted? And then, to help us grow in rhythms of rest and recreation, we're going to be looking at an ancient practice throughout this series, a practice that Jesus himself embraced and lived, known as the practice of Sabbath. And we're going to ask what it might look like to recover something that we have lost. Not just rest as like an item that we're going to check off our to-do list, but rest as a way of being, a rhythm, a practice that shapes the kind of people that we are becoming. And so I want to share a passage from Matthew 11. Jesus speaks these words to a crowd who was exhausted. And I want you to let these words land as though you're hearing them for the very first time. And so let's listen carefully, because I believe that Jesus is speaking directly into the exhaustion of our lives right now. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Matthew 11:28-30. Are you tired? Jesus asks. I mean, who isn't? Jesus is not surprised by our exhaustion. He sees it. He sees us. And his response is not a lecture or a program or a productivity hack. His response is an invitation. Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. And then notice what he says next. He says, I'll show you how to take a real rest. Not a nap, not a vacation, a real rest. The kind of rest that restores something really deep within us. The kind that doesn't just address the symptoms, but actually heals the root. And the pathway to that rest is a rhythm of relationship walking with Jesus, working with Jesus, keeping company with Jesus. Now, personally, I love the phrase used here, the unforced rhythms of grace. And when I hear that, it's like my whole body softens. Doesn't that sound like good news? Unforced, not striving, not panicking, not performing. There's a rhythm available to us that's not driven by anxiety or ambition, but by grace. And Jesus says, watch how I do it and learn from me. So friends, how does that invitation land with you today? Are you longing for that kind of rest? Are you eager for this kind of rhythm of walking with Jesus in his rhythms of rest, recovery, grace, and freedom? Well, to help us consider how we might respond to this invitation to walk with Jesus and to grow in experiencing this kind of rest in our lives, I want to introduce us to the ancient rhythm of Sabbath that Jesus himself practiced. Today, I want us to consider why Sabbath matters, what it is, and how it flows from the very life and practice of Jesus. Because here is the invitation at the heart of this series. Sabbath is not a rule to keep, it's a gift to receive, and it's a gift that changes everything. So what do we mean by Sabbath? Well, let's go back to the very beginning. In Genesis 2, after 6 days of creative work, we see that God rested. The Hebrew word for Sabbath is Shabbat, which simply means to cease, to stop, to rest. And then in Exodus, the practice of Sabbath is formalized in the 10 Commandments. The people of Israel are instructed to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 1 day in 7, set apart. A rhythm woven into the very fabric of creation itself. And here's what I have come to understand. Sabbath is way more than just a day off. It's a way of being in the world. The practice of Sabbath is a day of rest by which we cultivate a spirit of restfulness in all of life. It's a practice by which we undergo a dramatic shift. We move from restlessness to restfulness, from hurry to peace, from busyness to margin, from burnout to a sustainable pace, from noise to quiet, from distraction to clarity, from grasping to gratitude. And there's also something really beautiful for us to know about how the ancient people, the ancient Hebrews, understood time. The biblical day for them began not at sunrise, but at dusk. In fact, each new day began with the evening. The day began with rest. And I mean, think about what that communicates. It communicates that we don't earn our rest. We begin with rest. Get this, we live from rest, not for it. Rest is not the reward at the end of a productive day. It's the gift at the beginning. I saw a poster recently that simply read, "As slowly as possible." And I couldn't stop thinking about this phrase. I began to reflect on my life. I mean, what if I applied that to a conversation with a friend, to savoring a cup of coffee in the morning, to eating a meal without looking at my phone, to watching the sunset over the lake? What if moving as slowly as possible became a spiritual practice? What if attentiveness became a form of prayer? The late poet Mary Oliver spent her life paying attention to the world around her. She wrote about grasshoppers and swans and the beauty of ordinary summer days with a kind of awe and delight that personally I find deeply compelling. She understood that living a life of paying attention requires slowing down. You and I cannot truly see what we are racing past. And near the end of her poem, which is entitled "When Death Comes," she writes that when her life is over, she does not want to have simply visited the world. She writes that she wanted to have been a bride married to amazement, a bridegroom taking the world in her arms. Now that is a person who learned how to pay attention. And in the poem, The Summer Day, she closes with a really beautiful question, which I believe is one of the most important questions that you and I could sit with this summer. She writes this: tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Now, friends, what would it mean for us to answer that question, not from a place of hurry and exhaustion, but from a place of rest and renewal? For me, there's really just one question at the heart of all of this. I mean, why does Sabbath matter so much? And why is Jesus so insistent on this practice? Why does Jesus model it again and again throughout his ministry, slipping away to lonely places, resting in the stern of a boat during a storm, gathering his disciples and saying, "Come away with me to a quiet place and get some rest"? Well, the answer, I believe, is love. I mean, think about it. How many of us are abounding in love when we're tired? I mean, honestly, when you and I are exhausted, depleted, running on empty, what does our love look like? What does our patience look like? What does our generosity look like? I think we all know the answer. I mean, we are at our worst when we are tired and exhausted and in a hurry, and we're at our best when we're rested, grounded, and unhurried. Lately, I've been thinking about St. Francis of Assisi. Now, living in the 12th century, St. Francis of Assisi built his entire life around simplicity and slowness and attentiveness. And that attentiveness transformed both the people he served and himself in the process. He noticed things that other people rushed past. He found sacred in the ordinary. He paid attention. And the turning point of his life came when he encountered a man living with leprosy outside the city, someone that everyone avoided, someone that was shrouded in stigma and had fear and repulsion attached to them. St. Francis laid eyes on this man and approached him from a place of shared humanity. And in that moment, the fear and disgust loosened their grip. Francis embraced the man, and the encounter changed the entire trajectory of his life. Okay, so why am I sharing this story? Because what I love about St. Francis is that out of that encounter, his life's work became one of meeting suffering with compassion and love. And guess what sustained him in that really sacred, important work? Well, he did this by unapologetically building rhythms of rest and retreat into his life. His vocation and his calling had incredible impact, and all of that flowed out of the rhythms of rest and retreat as he learned and practiced the unforced rhythms of grace. In John 13:35, we read this: "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." The defining characteristic of a Jesus follower is a life of love. Love, active, gritty, sacrificial, patient, generous, others-oriented love. And I am convinced that we cannot overflow with that kind of love when we're exhausted and burnt out and running on fumes. And so, what if a summer of rest and renewal and recreation created the space for us to actually recover our lives? And what if learning the unforced rhythms of grace made us more loving, more present, more creative, more alive, more joyful? I mean, couldn't the world use more of that? What if this community, what if each of us became known by our love? Imagine what is possible. Now, in closing, I want to be so honest about something. I felt a ton of resistance writing this message because slowing down is hard. It's hard for me, and it has to begin with me. I can't invite you into something that I'm not willing to live myself. And I'm not always great at this. I mean, the pull toward hustle and hurry and productivity is so real. And let's face it, society rewards us for it. The pressure to produce, to perform, to keep up is absolutely constant. But when I look at Jesus, I see something I long for. I see a life that is slow and rich and connected and uncomplicated. I see Jesus who was never in a rush and yet never missed anything important, never scattered and yet fully present to everyone he encountered. He lived from rest. He embodied love. And he says to each one of us today, come and learn from me. Personally, I want my work and my life to flow from that place of slowness and rest, not from adrenaline, not from hustle, not from striving. I want to walk more and more in step with Jesus as I learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And I know I can't do it alone, and neither can you. We need the support of each other as we grow to live in the lightness and freedom that Jesus invites each of us into. Now, I want to acknowledge that a full day of Sabbath each week might feel impossible for some of you right now. And I need you to know that this message is intended to be heard as good news, not something causing shame or guilt, not at all. And so I want to invite you to start small. I mean, what is one step you could take this week toward rest, toward Jesus, toward moving just a little bit more slowly? Maybe it's a morning walk without your phone. Maybe it's sitting for 10 minutes quietly before the day begins. Perhaps it's silencing the notifications on your phone. Maybe it's saying no to one thing so that you can say yes to something restoring. Okay, let's imagine all of us arriving in September rested. Imagine how much love we could know and share and experience within us and among us. Imagine what might be possible in our relationships, in our families, our health, our community. Imagine what God might be able to do in and through people who are refreshed and renewed and rested and restored. The way of Jesus is the way of love. And it begins with us receiving the invitation to come to him just as we are, in all of our weariness, in all of our exhaustion, as together we learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And so over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be exploring Sabbath together more deeply. So next week, we're going to be looking at Sabbath as stopping, and then Sabbath as resting, and then Sabbath as delighting, and then in our final week, Sabbath as worshiping. And I am so looking forward to being on this sacred journey with each of you, deeply, deeply aware that the goal of a Sabbath way of life is that we spend time with Jesus, that we become like Jesus, that we live and love like Jesus. And so may each of us, in between these weekly encouragements to rest, be brave enough to take even small steps toward taking up the invitation of Jesus to find our rest in him. And in closing, I'd like to pray a short benediction over each of us. It's one that we're going to close with each week during the series. May the God of rest fill you with his peace and presence as you rest in him. Amen.